Hey, wake up, everybody. It's time for the History You Forgot podcast. Podcast where three veteran teachers with almost 90 years worth of teaching experience try to help you remember the stuff you slept through in class. Today, we're asking an age-old question. Does history repeat itself? I'm Jason Schmoida.
I'm Jason Jones.
And I'm Jeff Breedlove. Welcome to the fifth installment, I guess, actually, of the History You Forgot podcast. Like Mr. Schmoida said, we're going to discuss whether or not history repeats itself. But to start us off, Mr. Jones, you have a drink for us?
Yeah, the drink that is going with the show today is called the Sidecar. And we're going to talk about, this history repeating itself based on different seasons of the year and different things that we've read about here recently. And the Sidecar was developed after a winter season, the World War I era there. It was created in, they don't know for sure, Paris or London. And it was called the Sidecar because the patron who invented the drink was brought to the bar in a motorcycle sidecar.
Love that.
And so, they've got some cognac, some lemon juice, and what was the third ingredient?
Cointreau.
That's right, Cointreau.
With the sugared rim, though.
Well,
sure.
Yeah, it's not salt; it is sugar. But cheers, guys!
Cheers to episode number 5.
I haven't tasted it yet.
So all right, it smells good.
Yeah, there we go.
There's
some lemon juice in it. There's some lemon.
You know what? We may have to bring the pitcher down. All right, gang. So last few episodes, right, we've been doing much more content, right? We ended last week with Napoleon. And so Jason Schmoida came and said, hey, how about we do something this time that is a little bit bigger, a little bit more sort of 30,000 foot, right? Stay up to content and hopefully keep you guys still interested. And the adage, right, the old saying that, history repeats itself. Those who are, ignorant of history are condemned to repeat it, right? Which is something we do. Mr. Schmoida has read a book. It's always a dangerous thing, boys, right? But I read a book. So why don't you go ahead and just tell us what it is?
Well, the idea for it, for me, everybody hears that phrase, right? History repeats itself. Those that don't know history are condemned to repeat it. And there is a theory out there. It's called the Strauss-Howe theory. This was published, the original book was published in the 90s. And we're going to talk a little bit later about some details there. But what they're doing is they're trying to explain that there are these 80 to 120 year windows where there do seem to be cycles of history. And if you go back far enough, they do a really good job of kind of recounting how people see history. Like originally there was this sort of, I think they call it like a chaos theory, where it's just whatever was happening and we have to survive.
Random.
Yeah.
Right.
And eventually people, thinking closer to maybe Middle Ages or whatever, they started to see some cycles. And it probably was even more of an agricultural thing at that point, where they literally had seasons. So they kind of operated on that, and they learned about the sun and all that. We saw those kinds of seasons.
And remember, that's what most everybody worked in. That was everybody's job, agriculture.
Yeah. And then at some
point,
point, though, we developed this, what the authors talk about as a linear approach to history, where what we see is what happened before us, what's happening now, and what's coming next. And it's easy, right? It makes sense.
Linear is always easy.
Right. Linear is easy. What's coming next? But what it does is it forgets these patterns. And the authors have tried to pull that out. In my classroom, right, I have always taught that this is the importance of history, right? Like, we don't know the best steps forward unless you know where you are because of where you've been.
Right.
And so I just thought it'd be really fascinating to talk about, can we pick out pieces where we show that this actually kind of works?
Yeah, I think it's also important, right, to keep having this conversation, regardless of whether you teach, right? I mean, I think that, the adage or the idea of history repeating itself, it kind of gives a valid argument then to the fact that we need to keep studying history, right? I mean, we've been leaning into the hard sciences for so long, like, math and science and engineering. But at the core of it, right, if you don't understand context, the events, the people, the places, the situations that have come before, the argument could be made that, times we live in, you can always find something to compare it to. Right now, are we looking too hard? Maybe. I don't know, but I look, but the conversation I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. What influences
Yeah.
where we're going, and it's history. It's what we've been through, and so that encourages other people to make decisions that influence the rest of the world sometimes.
Yeah, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Sort of with I'll just sort of summarize maybe the argument in the book, the turning point, right? No, fourth turning. Fourth turning. It's been a long week. The fourth turning. So the idea is, like Jason said, right, that there's sort of 80 to 120 year blocks of time that are sort of delineated by events, right? And that, like life, they go through seasons, and sometimes they go through like stages of life, like boomers and middle age and elderly, etc. But that as you go back and plot, right, there's four. So there is spring, which is an awakening, right? A new start, usually after some sort of chaotic or sort of catastrophic event, right? That there's a new beginning, right? So people are excited, paradigm is shifted. 20, 25 years. Second phase then comes summer, right? Where the newness wears off, right? A little bit of the shine is gone. And we begin to question the institutions that have been created, right? Are they working for us? How is it really figuring? Are we all benefiting as much as we thought we had? And so you get this sort of beginning of a divide, right? Between people and the institutions. Fall then rolls in. And in fall, right, you see rise of the individual over the institution. So you've got much more sort of, I guess you'd call them sort of like mini snippets of possible events, right? Like little mini revolutions, or people are clearly upset, or there's riots or rebellions. And the idea being then that the system is starting to break down for whatever reason.
And he refers to that third stage as the unraveling.
The unraveling, right? Excellent. So you got the awakening, you've got then this sort of summer period of like nice, happy, you got the unraveling. And then the unraveling inevitably then leads to the fourth season, right, which is crisis, right, or chaos. And typically it ends with some sort of cataclysmic, war or catastrophe, and really ugly, really bad, really sort of generational change. But if you believe in the cyclical theory, right, then there's an end, and then eventually a spring will come. So that's the basis. Did I do a pretty good job of it?
Yeah, no, that was good.
No,
That was good. And so let me give a European history type of example. So if we start with a winter, so the kind of the ending here, the Napoleonic era, 1815, Napoleon has controlled Europe. He has imposed his Napoleonic codes, and everybody is forced to try to be a Frenchman, right? And so
as we sip our sidecars,
and so Napoleon's defeated. And so now you're into the spring, right? And you've got these countries that have all this nationalism. They've got pride because they're back on their own, if you will. They're trying to put their monarchies back together.
Napoleon is gone.
Napoleon's gone, but the monarchies aren't the normal absolute monarchy. They're more of a constitutional monarchy. So people have a few more rights, those kinds of things. And there's economic opportunity because you're in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution. Right. So then you jump into summer, and you've got the revolutions of 1848. You've got political liberalism, where people are saying, hey, we want more rights. Right. We're on our own again, but we're still being treated like we're peasants and second class citizens. We want more rights.
Yeah, so you probably got like the unification of Germany.
You do
in there, Italy.
Yeah,
that whole kind of chaos at the end.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Everybody thinks Germany and Italy have been around forever, right? And they both became unified countries in 1870.
Things you should have learned.
Yeah, so they are new countries, but there's chaos there because now they're wanting to beat their chest a little bit, right, and show their strength. And then you go into the fall, and that's where that unification. You get some Franco-Prussian War and some different things that are ways that the new countries are showing their strength, I guess.
So balance of power shift.
Yeah, and you get Germany starting to become more of an industrial power, things of that nature. And then in that fall period, and we'll talk more about this later, but you get the idea of Maine. We used to always teach Maine, right? Militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Right. And then those causes or those issues lead into the next winter, which is World War One.
The whole, like the war years.
Right. Yeah.
One and two.
One and two. Yeah.
Which I think then sets up then the next spring, which is going to be this sort of post-war. I mean, people
Well,
like finish the cycle, right?
The Roaring Twenties, right, in the United States.
Oh, yeah, really, even post World War II as well.
Yeah.
We could look at that.
Well, that's true too.
So from the American perspective, that line of events, the 19th century developments there, kind of lines up for us, whereas we're post-revolution, and there's all this feeling of the new country and the new identity. And especially after the War of 1812, we're really excited. There's a little bit more of a rise of this nationalism, and we're coming together as a country and experiencing nationalism. In that case, nationalism is good. But we're also expanding and increasing, which is going to lead to a couple of things, right? People are going to say soon, I want more rights, right? Which is totally fair, and it's an American idea. But as we expand, it gets harder to figure out how are we going to distribute those rights to people.
Who gets them?
Who gets those rights? Movements will start. So we get past that spring and into a summer where you start to see a little shuffling, and you'll get some movements like abolitionism, people starting to voice their complaints about slavery, feminism, women want some rights as well. And that will eventually turn into a summer where you have just a little bit of unfolding. And when we get to, a fall, right, where we start to get a little bit of that unraveling, and I see that in America as the 1850s.
Oh, absolutely.
And in the 1850s, when everything was a conflict between expansion, slavery, division between the federal government, the states governments, and that's going to lead to the Civil War for us.
North-South.
Right. And the difference in culture from north to south.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Now, timing's a little bit different there, but for us, after the Civil War, there's another little mini period there. And I don't know how the authors of the book, I'd love to know how Strauss and Howe would look at this too, because it almost looks to me like after that climax of the Civil War, you have another kind of rebirth where we come to the industrial boom of the Gilded Age, but it immediately leads to corruption, total amount of corruption, reforms. And now all of a sudden we're jumping into World War I with the European powers, and that kind of lines us up there.
Yeah, but even I think, I mean, if I, like again, not the American history thing not being my forte here, right? But I think if you count the Civil War in that period, the Reconstruction after it is the chaos, right? Where everything is getting completely blown out the one line. Yeah. Even that sort of Gilded Age progressivism would be a spring, in the sense that, I mean, for some, in the fact that, there's opportunity and cities are booming and it's kind of that second industrial revolution and completely unfair and much poor.
There's those two eras, a lot of wealth.
Right. The middle class is beginning to rise. I mean, for a lot of people, not that the Civil War was the turning point, but that post-Civil War period, there's some opportunities for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Even if migration.
It's interesting to me because you do see two, like one of the things the authors talk about is this, the spring and summer have some periods of reform where people are, and in this context of the United States, there's actually two periods of reform there. There's like 1830s, 1840s kind of reform, and then there's the 1890s into 1900 where you got the early sort of pop, like I mentioned before, feminism, abolitionism, and those kinds of things. But by the time you get to the early 20th century, it's progressivism. It's a full-on reform, and that might be the bigger reform period of them, to where you can kind of see things beginning to unravel even here at home.
Yeah. So I think that brings the point, like we talked about earlier, is that if you kind of look at these periods, right, the 18 to 100 years, both the book and I think we kind of decided that then if you look at the World War, the era of the World Wars as the crisis, the catastrophe, the chaos, well, clearly in post-World War II is the spring, right? You've got a rebirth instead of, everything's over, democracy is safe, industrialization sparks again, right? Space race, Cold War.
But you really have the United States that is really feeling the spring, right? Because they're the one that the victor gets the spoils. You've got the other victors that are, their territory has been much more damaged and by the war, right? I mean,
I didn't think though the Soviet Union would count that as a spring because they're now on the map as well, right?
They are,
and they've caught up to the West, and they've got a bomb. I mean, like all the things that we take for granted. I think so.
Well, and for 4 years, 1945 to 1949, the United States is unquestionably the most powerful country on earth. But starting in 1949, the Soviets take that in a kind of a bipolar Cold War world that we know, and that's kind of the peak of their power, if you think about it. They've, other than maybe you guys could probably go back a little further and see, but did they ever play that prominent of a role? So I think you're right.
I mean, I don't let that. We're not going to upset all the Russianologists by
No,
going down a path that's like, oh, right. But that's a good question. I mean, I think that's a whole separate episode. The rise of Russia. I think the question we were talking about, though, is if you assume that Cold War is the spring, right, then that naturally means that 60s civil rights, 70s is the sort of awakening and the sort of summer, right? That the things are changing. People are recognizing they have rights.
Reforms, right?
Reforms, changes are being made. And then I think the author of the book, and this is where we get to talk, right?
Right.
Is that they have the 80s to 2000s as the fall,
Kind of that
as they call it the culture wars, right? So it's sort of, Reaganomics, the rise of
Fall of the
urban
Berlin
middle class,
Wall.
fall of the Berlin Wall. You
Fall of Russia's
all of
communism.
that, right? You've got that whole era where things are just completely reborn and new, and the paradigm shifts, right? So everybody's like wondering about the institutions, and it kind of pegs the end of that fall of somewhere, like they predict, which is why when the original book was written in the 90s, right, that the fourth season, right, or the chaos, is 2005.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, right? So I saw that date, and this is why I think the conversation is going to get good, is that's Bush 2, right in the center of Bush 2. You've got the Iraq sort of situation, incursions, right? It's Kuwait, right? It's all that sort of new worldy kind of stuff. But then this is what I was trying to think. I was trying to go through and go, 2005. They said around, right? So I'm like, what around that? You ready? This is what I haven't even told you this yet. 2006, Twitter.
Yeah.
And now I'm wondering, like, can you trace back the beginning of the chaos to the rise of social media?
My initial, my initial.
Sorry, but anything like all of a sudden, I just thought about that today. I'm like, you know what?
Social media, and I know a
Especially
lot of
20 years
people
on,
aren't going to
looking
like this take, but it is definitely a problem, and you can argue that social media itself is a winter.
Well, it's changed the discourse and how we discourse and what we talk about,
how people treat each other.
It's
an avenue to that winter, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
I would, in my mind, when you said around 2005, I immediately went to 9/11 and thought that
2001,
because that was certainly a shift or that whole thing. But you're right, man, that's really big. But it's the tool, it's the avenue, and now because whatever it is that's cataclysmic, whatever it is, if these authors are right, whatever it is that culminates all this, it's going to be global.
Yeah, that's the whole idea.
It's not going to be,
And that's why I'd love to ask the author, how long can a season be? Because I think you could argue you got out of World War II. You had 4 years with the United States not in a conflict. By 1950, we're fighting again in Korea.
Totally.
And then Korea clear through Vietnam,
60s.
right? So, 15 years.
Yeah.
But I think my guess would be that if you look at that Vietnam era versus, say, Cold War Korea, even those two wars were still fought in that kind of containment U.S. greatness. Vietnam sort of shifts, right?
Definitely.
It's not a popular war. It changes the way we look at government, our democracy is seen.
So something that might be real helpful, just very quickly. I can't really talk about this, but
so that especially.
So from World War II, Cold War, we got into Vietnam in really 1954, stayed there till 1974. So Korea was before that. After Vietnam, we have kind of this period of peace and relativity. Détente, right? Which it's just
we're doing the 20-year cycles. You got 45 to 65.
Right.
65 is when Vietnam starts ramping up. 65 to 85, Reagan, and all that sort of 80s boomer consumerism, all that. Right.
Yep.
Margaret Thatcher, all that. Eventually fall of the Berlin Wall and all that, end of communism. And then you've got, so they go 85, 2005. So the best part is the second book, and I've only read a bit of it. The second book says we are currently in the fourth season.
So in a winter.
And the idea would be that it started sometime, whatever we decide, but that it should-ish, depending, to 2035.
Okay. So the debate then is what started that,
right?
Was it 9/11, like you mentioned, or was it the Iraqi war?
An unpopular foreign,
right? And I'm a believer that people are trying to do the right things. I think we all are.
I think we all were.
Or at least were. But you just like with the Iraqi war, we've supposedly found weapons of mass destruction or weapons, chemical weapons, and we never truly found those. But I'd like to think that President Bush and Colin Powell and those people, based on the information they had, believed it, and so it makes it an interesting topic of discussion to try to understand that whole situation.
So there is like, you guys know Niall Ferguson, another historian.
Yeah, right.
So one of his big theories, which is kind of controversial, by the way, but I'll just hit the quick part of it. Those those militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism, those things that started World War I. In a nutshell, what he says is that in the post-Cold War world, those things developed again. And so could you look in the last 30 years and see the rise of nationalism, the rise of growth and imperialism, the rise of some, kind of unusual alliances and some military growth. And
I think
really
definitely looking at some unusual alliances right now. I mean, and militarism, absolutely.
And, in IR, we would say, well, this is more of, are we in a unipolar world where the United States rules? Or are we in a multipolar world where everyone's competing for power? Because that's what was before World War I as well.
We're in a multipolar.
Right.
I would agree. I would totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I think
even if you're not talking militarily, you're talking economically, we're definitely in a multipolar.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the world is,
And IR, ladies and gentlemen, is international.
I'm so sorry.
I do that. I'm so sorry.
Well, sorry, all that jargon and stuff, right? The high level text speak that we use in education. No, but I think the point is really interesting. Like, so again, if you look at it as cyclical, right, then the question becomes, okay, so if we're in a period again of, clearly defense spending is way up across the board. There are multiple global situations right now. We've got Israel, you've got Russia, you've got Chinese and Taiwan, you've got the U.S. sort of blustering and lots of things going on.
Right.
Clearly because they have giant militaries. We clearly are in a much more sort of imperialist from an economic standpoint.
Sure.
Alliances are all wackadoodle.
Well, they're forming, I think.
Yeah, as we speak, they're deforming and reforming. Right.
And could you argue, guys, that we are going back to pre-World War I U.S. policy with isolationism?
Oh, for sure. I think it's I think that's the direction that was supposed to be going. I'm not sure.
It sometimes.
Yeah. Right. I was just going to say.
Sometimes
the idea is the same. Absolutely.
Right. So, but we would be. That would be about right in terms of our 100-year period.
Almost dead on, right? And then you think about this rising sort of nationalism, clearly, right? This sort of, exceptionalism, whatever you want to put the blank in.
Well, and it's not just the United States.
No, it's everybody. That's what I'm saying, right? Everybody is sowing their oats in a new world.
Yep.
And then I do think the point, which is completely probably an entire series of episodes, but, social media has come, and not to get on an old man rant, but it has completely changed the dynamic. People will say things they wouldn't say to your face.
Sure.
They say things that are not necessarily backed in fact. We don't necessarily look for the experts like we used to, right? Yeah. Everybody has an opinion and we think it's valid because it's on the internet, right? Well, you have an entire generation that's been raised with only that as a news source. For sure.
And we all think our opinion matters. and I don't think it does, including my own.
Like my dad used to say, opinions are like,
yeah,
fill in the blank. Right? Everybody has one, but I mean, but you don't want to hear it.
Right. and actually, they all stink and everything.
Exactly. And you should sit on yours.
Right.
Everybody wants to hear it. No, but I love that kind of when I was doing that today. I'm like, 2005, and then all of a sudden it's like Twitter, and I'm like, and not to blame one thing clearly, but I think when you put them all together, it raises an argument, and I love the argument that if we're in another situation where we're in that sort of confluence of events, right, that we've seen before, is something kind of scary, globally
going to happen.
Where's the breaking point?
Well, you sure hope not, but
yeah, there's usually a catalytic event. We know there's always something, an assassination of an archduke or a Great Depression or something, or Reichstag fire.
Right.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, and we're seeing.
I'm sorry, real fast. I apologize. Would there be an event like that for the Civil War? Like, would it be like Fort Sumter? Like, what would there be a kind of a good event where it's like building, and then all of a sudden it's like, what you can point to it and go slippery slope.
Probably, boy. And it's funny.
That's okay.
There's so many different places along the road. There really are, but like secession, Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, where all the northern states voted him in,
Right.
and he was able to do it without a southern state's vote.
Right.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back and made the South feel like they could not go any further. So maybe it's that.
Maybe.
But there were so many things leading up to that. But a lot of it, again, the theme for that would be American expansion and then rights, American expansion.
Which is
slavery is
same
all
thing
over.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What were you
But
gonna say?
everything
Well,
has that.
Talking about old men, I can't remember.
See, this is the problem with interrupting you, John. I'm going to have to write it down. Right? Put a pencil on it.
Yeah.
Well, but when we get to that, though, I think was one of the things that we should probably address is whatever that climactic event is that brings us to the end of this, what would a spring look like? Too, like, what would the next?
So wait, are you assuming that we're in the winter?
If
and
the
that
authors
it's
say we're in the
coming out
winter,
of it?
that there'll be some kind of a breaking point, right, where something goes that will eventually cause us to slide into that. And you said what, 2030s, right? Isn't that what the
2030s,
authors?
yeah.
The new book. But so
10 years. But I'm wondering, to back it up a bit further, right? Like, have we even, like, if we're in the fall, right? If I mean, are we really in? Like, are we
We've gotten
still
there.
right? Are we still
for the
waiting?
winter, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe we're in a catastrophic situation. Maybe I don't know.
Economics. I don't know if it'll be war, right? It could be an economic issue.
Yeah.
You brought up depression. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
I'm not going to use that
But-
word ever
right,
again.
but-
Right? It's a
but-
great recession.
Right. But you could, right now, you never know, right? We are trying to find our way economically in the world, right?
Or chart
but we-
our own way.
Yeah, and we also, because of Ukraine and Russia, are seeing Russia really push the limits, right? I mean, we've in
Well,
the
not
last
to date ourselves here, but I mean, they just sent up 12
right,
drones into a NATO country,
right,
right?
they
So,
were shot down,
yeah, right. But I mean, like,
Yeah.
that's clearly
right?
one step beyond what we've seen before, right? There's been a lot of saber rattling, but I mean,
Right.
come on, how much more of a warning do you need?
And it worries you when they choose to do that after they've had a big summit with
Right.
China and North Korea,
For sure.
and China, of course,
Good point. Yeah,
showed off
totally.
their military,
And,
Don't think
without the U.S.
right?
Right.
I know everybody watching knows this, right?
Really?
Because you're watching. But in addition to that, Israel's attack on Qatar, Saudi Arabia claiming to come to the defense of Qatar. There's
a
multiple.
lot of
You
stuff
got,
going
you
on.
got the Gaza situation going on.
There's
there.
a
How
lot
that's
of
gonna
stuff
turn
going
out,
on.
right?
I think it's very. I mean, something's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like.
Now, okay, I'm going to throw another starting point to this,
Good.
you guys. Okay, could it have been the Arab Spring and all of the revolution in the Middle East?
Or the attempt.
Yeah, that
That would have been what the starting.
that would have maybe kicked off
the
the
fall.
well, it could have been the fall or maybe the winter, the first start of the brutality
Could be.
towards
Right, but everybody else was getting. Well, I mean, then I guess in that regard, you jump on Tiananmen Square, right? So you go, okay, wait, everybody's getting democracy, like democracy for you, like an Oprah episode, right? Like
Right.
you get democracy, and you get, and then all of a sudden China tries it. It's like, but not you.
not you,
Right.
right?
So for context on that, though, real is like 2011, 2012. I think Yemen started maybe, or not Yemen.
What is it? Syria.
Syria had it. Yeah, Egypt.
Egypt.
Somebody did it and it worked, and then Egypt tried, Syria.
We are
tried,
really
and
going to
it
date
was
ourselves here right
destroyed.
now with like,
But you're kind of onto something,
I'm just-
especially because the
an
vast
idea.
majority of those terrible governments won.
Yeah.
Stayed.
yeah. See,
Right.
and I think maybe it is. Maybe it was the end of all that. You get democracy, and everyone's like, well, there's an end to that. Right?
Right.
There's a stopping point. I don't know. I think that, to go back to your point, Shweta, that if you look at what a spring would look like, I mean, and again, not to, put a date on this, but we're living in a time of some serious, like, partisan violence going on, right? I mean, you can't just, just
It's not
not talk about that without naming specifics. But, I mean, that violence piece, you and I and everybody at this table has seen that's, when things go from being, hey, you and I disagree, I don't like you,
right.
to being, you and I don't disagree, I hate you. And now there's like, I can't be with
Around
your
you.
friend. And then that final sort of like linchpin of like, right now you deserve to, I'm going to kill you, or,
Right.
whatever, like,
Right.
That political violence piece is always right on the cusp of
It's almost the last straw.
something.
Right.
I mean, there's something that it just,
Right.
and I think not only the fact that the people turn to global violence, or sorry, to political violence, but the sort of desensitization to it. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, violence, and then all of a
Right.
sudden it's like, how much violence? And then by the time we're like, wait a minute, that's a lot of violence, it's too
Too
late.
late.
And now it's violence, and then it's like big
Right.
violence, right? We're
Right.
not, we're no longer
Well,
idiots. I don't know. I don't know. I just, I
Yeah.
hate to, it's almost one of those saying, but I hate to say it. It's too scary to think about. Like, where are we in that fourth season? And what if we don't come out of it? Like, what if
Right.
it's
Well,
more than 10 years?
with,
I don't know.
with the politics and the way it is in our country right now, I tell my own kids and I tell my students, you get to choose how you respond, right? There isn't a canned response. You don't have to like what they say, but you don't have to be negative too.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to get back to that. We had a great Senator, Bob Dole, who reached across the aisle, right? John McCain reached across the aisle. Ted Kennedy reached across the aisle. And we don't have a lot of that anymore. And we've got to get people that are willing to do that.
And that might be actually the sort of full circle moment, right, for the episode, if you think about it, right? If you're talking about how you respond to the events, change the next series of events.
That's for sure.
Like Mr. Schmoida said at the beginning, right? If you understand history, your response to it then is based on and how you choose to respond.
Yeah.
So what we like, why don't you hit that point again? And like,
Well, I might think this is even a good time to jump in and say, hopefully people watch and see that what we're trying to do is be very objective. And this is the way we approach all this stuff. I mean, we're going to be political because you can't help but talk about politics, but we're not at all trying to be ideological.
we're partisan.
Right.
No,
Right.
yeah.
We're partisan.
Our job
like that.
isn't to teach a kid
Yeah.
what to believe. Our job is to teach kids both sides.
Sounds
And
like
let
I'm
them
gonna job
choose.
to tell you what to believe.
Right. For sure. But you know what I mean?
No, I do. No,
I think
absolutely.
I think the narrative right now of educators is that that's what we're doing. We're teaching a side, and that's not what at least the three of us believe.
No, it's not what
This is one,
anybody knows.
not anybody we know. This is what one side thinks. This is what the other side thinks. You need to decide
Critical
what
thinking.
you think.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to spitball and throw stuff out there
Yeah.
and see, what maybe.
See if it works.
Yeah.
Well,
Experiment.
from a famous movie, run it up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes.
Run it up the flag. I like that.
Well, I think that if we kind of look at that as a nice circle, then it brings us to our Mr. Schmoida. If you could have a
Man.
drink with anybody this week, who would it be?
And I took the low hanging fruit. I did.
It's
And-
us.
Yeah.
These guys right
That's really low.
It absolutely. But I thought about, we have so many.
Ouch. That wasn't sarcasm. Man, I'm just telling you.
I thought about like some political commentators today and see their take on this, but it has to be the author of that book, right? So
The turning point.
yeah. So the authors Strauss and Howe. Neil Howe is still alive. Strauss, the other author, who's no longer with us. And I haven't read. You've looked at the second book. I haven't
Gone
looked at
the second book.
Totally encourage you guys to check that out because I'm curious to see. Okay, we've just spitballed. What are all these things? It's been a couple of years since he's written that story.
2023,
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Okay, tell me what you think because he's kind of the Nostradamus,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
He kind of
yeah.
has an idea.
Which is a great
of
reference. Yeah.
The stuff in the first book that they predicted, right? So this was the 90s, and they were predicting like a terrorist attack where an airplane is used. They predicted a pandemic. I mean, they predicted all these things that could potentially be a turning point. So now I want to know, all right, predict what's next.
So-
I want to know what's coming.
So do they write The Simpsons?
Exactly. That is the best
Is that it,
indicator.
fortune
of-
telling for cartoon series?
That's pretty good. I don't know. So I think it'd be him. Just to like sit down and pick his brain. All right, what's the next?
Yeah.
What's the next chapter?
Since he's living in these times.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Like how does it fit your narrative?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
on that note,
Well, I just would say that you had a hard. There are so many people in the 200 or 300 years of it. You could have.
Oh, it could have been.
I know, right? That's a tough one.
decision.
Anybody.
I don't envy you that choice, right? Because I was sitting there thinking about that. I'm like,
Well, we're next episode. We're looking at pre-Civil War.
Yeah.
We talked about it a couple episodes ago, but we're finally going to do it. The Jacksonian.
you threw one in here at you.
Yeah,
Right.
we're gonna enjoy a Tennessee whiskey that day. So I guess it's time to say
Class dismissed. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.